Hi, my name is Aisling, and I laughed when my mother burned my $39 million check in front of our entire family. Not because it was funny, not because I didn't care, but because in that moment, surrounded by people who once swore they'd protect me, I realized just how alone I truly was. And laughter was all I had left. It happened on a late June afternoon, under the awning of my grandfather's estate patio. The family reunion was already thick with tension. Too many fake hugs, too many smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. Nora, my mother, stood at the center, as always. Regal, in control, wrapped in a muted lavender dress and wrapped tighter in self-righteousness. She held the envelope like it was diseased, a pale cream envelope with a golden wax seal, Grandpa's signature mark for anything official. It had been sitting inside the family vault for months. Everyone knew that. Everyone also knew it was mine. Grandpa had made it clear in his last living will. He might have been slipping mentally, but when he saw me last fall, he looked me in the eyes and said, "This will help you build something real. Not borrowed. Not stolen. Yours." The room quieted as Nora raised the envelope over the small decorative fire pit we'd been roasting marshmallows over earlier. Her voice was calm. Almost too calm. "This doesn't belong to you, Aisling." And with a flick of her perfectly manicured hand, the check, a cashier's check worth $39 million, slipped into the flames. People gasped. Someone dropped a drink. Uncle Henry muttered, "Oh my God!" I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just stood there, watching the edges of the check curl into blackness, smoke twisting upward like a question mark in the evening air. And then I laughed. It started low, almost like a cough. Then it rolled up, sharp, startling. My shoulders shook with it. My own mother turned toward me, eyes wide, confusion flickering behind her usual ice. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "No," I said, "it's perfect." The thing about being publicly humiliated by your own mother is, it doesn't hit all at once. It simmers. It drips down your spine like ice water, seeps into your bones, and starts to rot everything soft inside you. I knew what she was doing. Burning the check wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about control. This was Nora's way of showing me that she still held the leash. Let me tell you a little about Nora. To the outside world, she's everything a woman aspires to be. Educated, elegant, charitable, chair of the local arts board, a smile that could disarm a room, and a voice that slithered through crowds like silk. But behind closed doors, she's a precision weapon. She cuts not with yelling or hitting, but with omission, with well-placed silence, with icy glances that say, "You disgust me," without ever moving her lips. She's the kind of mother who would host your birthday party and then tell you, mid-blowout candles, "That dress makes your hips look wide." She's the kind of woman who can convince an entire family that their daughter is mentally unstable because she once cried after her cat died. She's the kind of person who burns a $39 million check in front of 32 relatives and says it was an act of moral principle. "She's lying," I said, louder now, turning to face the crowd. "She knew what this was. Grandpa signed it over to me 6 months ago. It's in the will. There are witnesses. That money was mine." Silence, except for the gentle pop of firewood and the rustle of linen napkins in the wind. Grandpa sat in his chair, hands folded neatly in his lap, looking bewildered. His eyes were distant. He was still here, but not entirely. I could see the doubt bubbling in the room. A few cousins looked down. Aunt Meredith shifted uncomfortably. That was the most dangerous thing about Nora. She didn't need to win arguments. She just needed people to wonder if you might be wrong. "You think you've earned that money?" she asked. "What have you built? What have you sacrificed? You disappeared for 2 years. You came back with a degree and a list of grievances. You're not ready for that kind of responsibility." "And you are?" I said, sharp. "Because you chair some charity luncheons and wear pearls while embezzling half of Grandpa's retirement fund?" Gasps. There it was. She blinked. Just once. And then her face hardened like marble. I will not be spoken to like that, she said. You already spoke, I replied. You spoke when you threw that check into the fire. Nobody moved to stop her. Not even my brother Nolan, who I used to tuck in at night and sing to when Mom forgot to pick him up from school. Not even Grandpa, who once told me I reminded him of Grandma. Sharp, soft, stubborn. No one. And that silence. That was louder than any insult I'd ever heard. Later, as twilight curled across the backyard and everyone awkwardly filtered back into the house for dessert, Nora cornered me by the side gate. You made a fool of yourself, she said, her voice low. You made a thief of yourself, I replied. Don't pretend we're the same. She stepped closer. Her perfume was sweet and cloying, like rotting fruit. That money was never really yours. You know that. You wouldn't know what to do with it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because she had no idea what I already knew. No idea that the entire event was being recorded. That her voice had been caught, clear as crystal, claiming, "She'll never get a cent of this, even if I have to burn it myself." No idea that I had been building this moment for 6 months. That the check, while real, was not the only document in play. She'd made her move. Now it was my turn. It was. It's easy to think the real damage comes from things people say to your face, but I've learned that some of the worst wounds come from the things they never say at all. When I was 8, I brought home a painting from school. Nothing special, just a watercolor mess of a tree with crooked branches and yellow leaves that looked more like pasta shells. I was proud of it. My teacher even put a gold star in the corner. I remember showing it to my mom, beaming. She glanced at it once and said, "Well, some kids are creative, and some kids are good at other things." Then she turned back to her phone, sipping iced tea like she hadn't just crushed something fragile. It wasn't just what she said. It was the implication. You're not enough. That feeling never left. Not when I aced every test she told me wasn't hard enough. Not when I won a scholarship to Berkeley and she said, couldn't get into Harvard. Not even when Grandpa, for the first time in years, looked at me and said, "You're the only one who doesn't want something from me." Nora had a gift. She could twist admiration into guilt, pride into shame. She used silence like a sculptor uses clay, shaping your self-worth into a version she could manage, something she could control. That's what I'd become. Manageable. After the bonfire incident, I drove back to my apartment in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the hum of the engine and the hollow space behind my ribs. I kept replaying the moment in my head. My laugh, the gasps, the check curling into smoke. It should have felt triumphant, but it didn't. It felt like a trap I'd willingly walked into. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up around 2 a.m., poured a glass of water, and stared out the window. Across the street, in someone else's apartment, a mother held her toddler on her hip. They danced quietly in their living room. No music, just movement. She looked tired, but she smiled, and I found myself whispering, "Do you know how lucky you are?" I wasn't talking to her. I was talking to myself. The next morning, I called Grandpa. "Hey, it's me." A pause. Then, "Who?" My stomach dropped. "Aisling, your granddaughter." "Oh, of course. Sorry, darling. My mind's been dusty." His voice cracked like old wood. I asked if he remembered the check. He hesitated. "Grandpa, did you really give it to me? Or did Mom convince you to change your mind?" He stopped. "I remember wanting you to have something of your own. I don't remember the numbers, but I remember how proud you looked when I said you deserved it." I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to that. But the seed of doubt was already sprouting. If he couldn't remember the details, Nora would use that. Twist it, exploit it. She already had. Later that day, I drove to the family lawyer's office. His name was Walter Greer, pale, jittery, always looked like he was halfway through biting his nails. "I need to see the will," I said. Walter blinked. "Your mother already took care of all that." I narrowed my eyes. "What does that mean?" He cleared his throat. She had power of attorney filed 3 months ago. Your grandfather signed it during a hospital stay. No, he didn't, I said. I was there. He wasn't even admitted. Walter looked uncomfortable. She had medical documentation. I filed it myself. That document is fake, I snapped. He wouldn't meet my eyes, and that's when I realized he knew, maybe not everything, but enough. Walter, I said slowly, do you have a daughter? He hesitated, then nodded. If someone did this to her, what would you do? He didn't answer, but he slipped me a folded sheet of paper as I left. This fell off the file, he said softly. Inside was a photocopy of the original cashier's check, with my name, and under it, a legal memo suggesting Nora was transferring assets into the family trust to consolidate wealth in a more tax-efficient format. In English, she was stealing my inheritance before Grandpa was even cold. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the paper so tightly it left creases in my palms. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was war. That night, I pulled out a journal I hadn't touched since high school, the one I used to write poems in. Mostly sad ones, mostly about not being seen. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "She taught me to hate the parts of myself that reminded her of her own failure." Then I called Nolan, my brother, the one I'd once protected when Mom yelled too loud, the one I baked brownies for when his pet rabbit died, the one who looked away when she threw that check into the fire. He picked up on the third ring. Hey! Hey! Pause. I just wanted to ask, why didn't you say anything? He didn't pretend not to know what I meant. I didn't know what to say. Maybe "that's not okay" would have worked. She's our mother. No, I said. She's your mother. I'm just the one she needed to control. He exhaled sharply. It's not that simple. It is, I whispered. You just don't want to admit it. By the end of the call, I was shaking, not with rage, with sadness, because I realized I was running out of people to call. Back at the apartment, I opened a file on my computer I'd labeled Plan B. It was an encrypted document I'd started years ago during law school, just in case. Inside were folders, emails from Nora, manipulation, text screenshots, silent treatment patterns, audio recordings, grandpa conversations, Walter Greer, legal trails. I had everything, every receipt, every breadcrumb. And now I had a reason to use them. She wanted me to be a version of her, polished, controlled, polite, and afraid. But she forgot something. Even clay breaks if you fire it long enough. In my family, silence was currency. But paper, signed, stamped, notarized, was power. The next morning, I walked into the county registrar's office with a folder tucked under my arm and fury curled neatly beneath my ribs. The waiting room smelled like vinyl chairs and decades of disappointment. I checked in with the receptionist, who smiled at me with the kind of practiced pity that only civil servants can master. Reason for your visit? Property records, I said. I need a certified copy of a deed transfer, the Barnes family estate. She tapped something into the computer, frowned, and said, You're not Nora Barnes? I offered a tight smile. No, but I'm the reason she should be worried. The records clerk led me into a back room where dusty files lined the shelves like tombstones. The hum of a fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, like an anxious thought that wouldn't go away. After 20 minutes, he slid a folder across the table. Original file plus the amendment. Amendment? I flipped through. My breath caught in my throat. There it was. A notarized transfer of estate control, signed by Grandpa, dated 3 months earlier, appointing Nora Barnes as primary beneficiary and trustee of all assets. Except, the signature wasn't right. Too perfect. Too smooth. Grandpa's hand had trembled for years. This one looked like it came from a laser printer, not a man on blood pressure meds and memory decline. And the notary? I blinked. Angela Sims, my cousin, Nora's niece, the same girl who once got kicked out of community college for forging a parking permit. A familiar tightness wrapped around my chest. My mother hadn't just manipulated Grandpa. She'd built a web, full of spineless relatives and forged pens, and somehow no one had noticed. I took photos of everything, every page, every timestamp, and then I did something I hadn't done since college. I drove to Angela's place. Angela lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat that reeked of bleach and loneliness. When she opened the door, she blinked like she hadn't seen sunlight in 3 days. "Wow," she said. "Look who crawled out of exile." "Cut the crap," I said. "We need to talk." She stepped aside wordlessly. The inside smelled like takeout and broken promises. A cat darted across the floor. On the coffee table sat an unopened eviction notice. "Money's tight, huh?" Angela scoffed. "What do you want, Aisling?" "Your signatures on Grandpa's estate transfer." Her face paled, but her jaw stiffened. "So?" "So unless you're moonlighting as a licensed notary, which we both know you aren't, this is fraud." She didn't respond. I pulled out the deed copy and laid it on the table like a playing card. "I'm not here to lecture you. I just want to know the price." Angela swallowed hard. "She said it was just a formality, that Grandpa was going to sign anyway. She gave me $5,000. Did you see him sign it?" "No." "Then you witnessed a lie." "I know." Her voice broke. "But I needed rent." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "You want to fix this?" "How?" "Give me a statement, a signed affidavit. Swear under penalty of perjury that the signature wasn't witnessed and that Nora instructed you." Angela's eyes widened. "You're going to the police?" "No," I said. "Not yet." "Then who?" "Everyone else." Angela gave me what I needed. She cried while writing it, and I didn't comfort her, because I didn't have space for someone else's guilt. By the time I left, it was late afternoon. The sun hung low, painting the city in warm streaks that felt unearned. I drove to the office of a woman named Jordan Keene, an investigative journalist who once exposed a church laundering scheme that made national news. I'd read every article she wrote. Her assistant looked skeptical at first. Then I handed him a USB drive and a neatly compiled dossier. "If you want to see what generational theft looks like," I said, "start here." 3 days later, she called me. "I read everything." "And?" "You're sitting on a bomb." Jordan wasn't interested in gossip. She wanted data, verification, full documents. She wanted someone who could go on record. That someone had to be me. I hesitated. "I don't want this to be about revenge," I said. "It won't be," she replied. "It'll be about justice. The difference is, justice has receipts." At night, I still felt hollow. Even victory, when soaked in betrayal, tastes like rust. One night, I stood in my kitchen, lights off, watching lightning flicker across the skyline. My phone buzzed. A message from Nolan. "You need to stop this before it gets worse." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "It's already worse. You just weren't looking." The morning the story broke, I woke up to silence. Not peaceful silence. The kind that hangs in the air like a threat. The kind that tells you something has shifted, but no one's told you what yet. I checked my phone. 6 missed calls, 24 texts, all from people who'd ignored me just a week earlier. And 1 voicemail, from Nora. "Aisling," she began, no greeting, no warmth. "I hope you're proud of yourself. Whatever stunt you just pulled, you've destroyed this family. You've humiliated your grandfather. You think the world is going to side with you because you have some paper trail? Good luck living with what you've done." Then the line went dead. Not a word about the truth. Not a word about the years she spent erasing me from my own life. Just blame, just control, wrapped in disappointment and acid. I should have expected it. But there was still a sting. There always is, with her. Jordan's article had gone live at midnight. A full exposé, names, dates, scanned documents, the fake notary claim, and legal analysis. Clean, precise, unarguable. The headline read, Mother, Matriarch, Thief. Underneath, Nora Barnes accused of orchestrating estate fraud against daughter, using family ties to cover financial abuse. It trended. Within hours. Nora's social media went dark. Her charity board released a statement. We are reviewing allegations. That was code for, we're preparing to cut her loose. For the first time in my life, she couldn't hide behind her reputation. She'd always controlled the narrative, not anymore. But what I didn't expect, what no one did, was Grandpa. That afternoon, a video surfaced. Jordan had tracked him down, with my permission, and asked if he remembered signing over the estate. In the clip, Grandpa sat on his porch, blinking into the sunlight, hands folded in his lap. I never meant to cut Aisling out, he said. I love her. She's the only one who ever came by just to talk. The papers. I didn't know what I was signing. I thought it was insurance. Nora said it would protect the house. He looked directly into the camera, voice trembling. If I was tricked, I want to make it right. That was the first public fracture in the wall Nora had spent decades building. Within minutes, my phone exploded again. This time, different. My cousin Tara wrote, I always wondered why she treated you like that. Aunt Meredith texted, I'm sorry, I should have said something years ago. Even Nolan finally called. I didn't know, he said. I swear. I didn't respond right away, because I didn't believe him. Not really. But a part of me wanted to, and that part was louder than I expected. 2 days later, I went to visit Grandpa. The estate was quiet. Too quiet. A staff member opened the door, then paused. She's here, she whispered. I blinked. Who? Nora. I felt my stomach twist. In the sunroom, Nora stood by the window, arms folded tight, her hair pulled back into a perfect angry knot. She didn't look up when I walked in. I see you've made a name for yourself, she said flatly. I said nothing. I didn't need to. You think this makes you noble? Turning your family into clickbait? No, I said. I think it makes me free. Her jaw tensed. This is your grandfather's home. He invited me. I'm still his daughter. And I'm still yours, but you've never acted like it. Then Grandpa shuffled into the room, moving slowly with his cane. He looked at both of us, two opposing pieces on a board he used to control. Nora, he said gently, you need to go. Her eyes widened. Dad? You've done enough. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stared. For a moment, I saw something like fear in her eyes, or maybe shame, but it vanished quickly, replaced by something colder. She walked out without another word. That was the last time I saw her in that house. After she left, Grandpa sat beside me. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have protected you better. I touched his hand. You did, just not the way you think. He looked at me for a long time. You remind me of your grandmother, he said. Fierce, quiet, too good at hiding how much things hurt. I blinked hard, because in all the years of being told I was too sensitive or too dramatic, this was the first time someone saw through it. But just when I thought the worst was over, the letter arrived, a subpoena, from Nora. She was suing me for defamation. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, the kind that looked expensive enough to hold good news. But as soon as I saw the law firm's seal in the corner, I knew exactly what it was. Nora was suing me for defamation, civil court, full hearing. It wasn't about clearing her name. It was about punishing me for being louder than she ever expected. She was trying to scare me back into silence. I sat on the floor of my apartment with the letter in my lap, surrounded by empty teacups and printouts from Jordan's article. The room was quiet, except for the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional groan of pipes overhead. I'd been ready for this. I had the documentation. I had testimony. I had public opinion. But none of that made the air in my lungs any easier to hold, because now this was legal: court dates, depositions, discovery. And Nora had money, power, influence. She'd never needed to be right. She just needed to be louder. I stared at the last line of the letter. "We look forward to resolving this matter appropriately." That was her voice, even on someone else's letterhead. Always polite, always poisoned. I picked up my phone and dialed Jordan. "Did you see the suit?" "I did," she said. "And before you ask, yes. It's weak. No judge in their right mind will let it hold up. Unless she drags it out to bleed me dry." There was a pause. Then Jordan said, "You're not alone in this. I'll help. I've been through worse, with worse people." It was comforting, but it wasn't enough. Because even if the lawsuit failed, even if I won, what would be left of me when it was over? 3 weeks later, I was standing in the hallway outside the courthouse. The air was muggy, thick with southern humidity, and the sidewalk glistened from an earlier rainstorm. Inside, Nora was waiting. She hadn't seen me since the sunroom, since Grandpa told her to leave. Now she sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed in tailored navy, pearls at her throat, her posture straight enough to cut glass. She looked like every part of the woman she wanted the world to believe she was. My stomach twisted, but I walked in with my head high. Her lawyer, some polished silver-haired man in a designer suit, nodded once as I passed. I wondered how much she was paying him. I wondered if he knew the truth. I sat across from her. She didn't look at me, and that was when I realized something. She wasn't here to talk to me. She was here to perform. The hearing was procedural, a motion to dismiss, scheduled in 30 days. But she had made sure I would have to sit in front of her, hear her accusations read into public record. That was her way. Not a slap, a whisper that echoes. I stared straight ahead as her lawyer recited a litany of nonsense: unlawful defamation of character, intentional emotional distress, malicious publication of falsehoods. Each phrase landed like a drop of cold water on hot skin. Jordan sat behind me, hands folded in her lap, silent and steady. After the hearing, Nora stood and finally looked at me. "Whatever you think you've gained," she said under her breath, "you'll lose." I leaned in just enough for her to hear. "I already lost everything that mattered. There's nothing left for you to take." Her smile faltered for just a second, a crack in the porcelain. Then she turned and walked away. That night, I returned home and found an envelope slid under my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a photo. Me, in a cafe, with Jordan, clearly taken through a window. On the back, a single line in cursive: "You always were easy to watch." My hands shook. This wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. She was escalating. She wanted me rattled, disarmed. I sat down and started breathing in fours. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Then I pulled out my laptop and opened the file labeled War Plan. Time to stop playing defense. I called Angela. "I need you to go on record," I said. "You already have my affidavit. I need video, a full statement, clear and direct." Angela was quiet. She said she'd cut me off if I talked more. "She will," I said, "but she's already cut you off in every way that matters." More silence. Then she whispered, "Send me the questions." Jordan arranged a neutral location, a rental space dressed like a mid-century living room, clean, safe. Angela sat on the couch, hands folded, hair pulled back. She looked different. Nervous, yes, but also awake. The cameras rolled. "I, Angela Sims," she began, "witnessed Nora Barnes forge legal documents relating to her father's estate. I was instructed to act as a notary despite not being certified. I did not witness the signing. I was paid $5,000 in cash." She looked into the lens. "I'm sorry, Aisling. I should have said no." I was behind the camera, nodding slowly. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. The video went live 3 days later. It took 12 hours for the public to turn. Not against Nora, against her. Comments flooded in. Some sympathetic, many brutal. The truth was out. And for the first time in this whole nightmare, someone besides me had said, "I believe you." But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. I felt like a bridge that had carried too much weight for too long. And there was more to come. Because that same night, Grandpa called. "I need to change the will," he said, "before it's too late." I had always thought closure would look like a courtroom victory. A judge slamming the gavel, Nora's lies unraveling on the record, her polished mask cracking in front of everyone who ever believed her. But when Grandpa's lawyer handed me the revised will, sealed, notarized, and signed in a room I wasn't even invited to, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like silence. Like standing in an empty theater after the final act, wondering if the applause was ever for you at all. I sat in the passenger seat of Jordan's car, envelope on my lap, hands numb. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at her. I thought it would feel like more. More what? Justice, fireworks, something. Jordan nodded. It usually feels like paper. Inside the envelope, my name was listed clearly as primary beneficiary. Grandpa had removed Nora completely. No trust account, no shared control, just me. It was everything she'd stolen, handed back without fanfare. And I didn't want it. That night, I drove to the estate. It was dusk. The kind of dusk where the sky turns to soft navy and the air smells like pine and regret. Grandpa sat on the back porch, wrapped in an old wool blanket. He looked smaller than I remembered. I sat beside him, not speaking. After a while, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a letter. "I wrote this last year," he said. "Meant to give it to you at Christmas. But Nora took the mail." I unfolded the letter. His handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. "You have always been braver than the rest of us. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry I let her carry so much of this family's weight on your back. You deserved a mother. What you got was a mirror." I didn't cry, but my throat closed around something thick and ancient. "I don't want the estate," I said. "I don't want the house, the land, any of it." Grandpa looked surprised. "Why?" "Because I finally understand that walking away doesn't mean losing. It means surviving." He smiled faintly. "You sound like her." "Who?" "Your grandmother." 2 days later, I packed my apartment in boxes. No press statement, no final word. Just me, a borrowed truck, and 2 friends from law school who didn't ask too many questions. I left a single envelope taped to my door. Inside it was my resignation from the lawsuit, not settlement, just surrender. Not because she was right, but because I was tired of letting her win by making me fight. The small town I moved to sat between 2 forgotten highways and a lake that looked like glass at dawn. I found a cabin on the edge of town, with creaky floors and a wide porch. It smelled like cedar and freedom. I bought a second-hand espresso machine and a scratched countertop oven. I named my new bakery Ash and Light, a nod to what burned. And what came after. The customers came slowly. A retired teacher. A woman in scrubs who cried the first time she bit into my lemon bar. A teenager with trembling hands who paid with crumpled bills and told me, "It's the first place I feel like I'm not in the way." Each day I woke up early, baked, swept, listened to silence without fear. Some days were harder. I'd hear a song Nora used to hum. I'd pass a stranger in a lavender coat and my pulse would spike. But it faded, little by little. And one afternoon, it happened. I looked at my reflection and didn't flinch. Nolan showed up unannounced. I was folding napkins behind the counter. He stood awkwardly near the window, eyes full of some emotion he hadn't finished processing. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. "You still live in the city." "I meant emotionally." I raised an eyebrow. "I saw the footage," he added, "of you resigning the lawsuit, of Angela's statement, of Grandpa's will change." He looked down. "I should have stood up for you sooner." You should have. I thought if I stayed neutral, I couldn't be blamed. You weren't neutral. You were silent. Nolan nodded. I know that now. He pulled something from his pocket. It was a tiny ceramic sparrow. You made this for me, in 8th grade. I took it from his hand. You threw it out. I kept it, just never showed you. I studied him, his posture, his honesty, the crack in his voice. Come inside, I said. That night, we sat on the porch eating warm blueberry muffins and talking about the versions of ourselves we had buried to make Nora comfortable. I wanted her to love me so badly, he said. Same. And I think, maybe she did, but only when we were small enough to control. We were quiet for a while. Then he said, What do we do with that? We don't have to do anything with it. We just have to stop making ourselves smaller to fit inside it. Later, I wrote a short email to Jordan. I told her thank you. She replied with 3 words. You made it. The first time someone called me brave, it was in a comment under a photo of a blueberry tart. A local food blogger had stopped by Ash and Light and posted a picture of her dessert with the caption, More than just a bakery. Feels like someone put heartache into an oven and baked it into healing. I didn't know her, but somehow she saw me, and that mattered. The town didn't ask questions. They didn't need my backstory, my trauma, my televised family drama. They just came in, bought their coffee, smiled, and came back the next day. But I started writing. Not for them. For me. It began with a blog post. Just one. My name is Aisling. I was told for most of my life that silence was strength, that good daughters keep secrets, that if something hurts, it's because you deserve it. The post ended simply. I'm not a daughter anymore. I'm someone else now. And maybe that's okay. I didn't expect much. I woke up the next morning to over 3,000 views. By noon, it was 25,000. Jordan texted, Have you checked your inbox? I had not. When I did, it took a full minute for the emails to load. Journalists, podcast hosts, survivors, anonymous users with stories more brutal than mine. Each one echoed the same thing. You told the truth, and so will I. I was invited to speak on a women's mental health podcast, intimate, slow-paced, no cameras. I almost said no. Then I remembered the girl who used to whisper apologies to herself at night after being told she'd embarrassed the family. She deserved to be heard. The studio smelled like lavender and old books. The host, Camille, smiled gently across the table. No pressure, just you and me. Talk as much or as little as you want. I nodded, heart pounding. She hit record. I used to think revenge would fix me, I began. Camille leaned in. But it didn't? No, it just made me tired. I wanted my mom to feel what she made me feel, but that's not justice. That's just continuation. Camille asked, So what broke the cycle? I hesitated. Honesty, not loud honesty, quiet honesty, with myself. The episode aired the next week. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages, thousands of stories. And then, something I didn't expect. A letter, handwritten, postmarked from a small town in Vermont. It was from Nora. I saw the podcast. I don't expect forgiveness. I won't ask for it. But for the first time, I see what I did. And I see what I missed. You were the best thing I ever made, and I spent my life trying to erase you. There was no return address, just her name. And a photo. A photo of her in a rehab center. Smiling. Not pretty smiling, real smiling. I didn't cry. But I stared at that photo for a long time. Because for the first time in years, my mother didn't look like someone I had to survive. She looked like someone trying. Nolan came back again a few weeks later. This time with a suitcase. I need a reset, he said. I let him stay in the guest room. He worked part-time at the local library. Every night we had tea on the porch. Do you think she meant it? He asked, holding the photo. I think she's still learning that truth isn't about what people believe. It's about what you're willing to live with. That weekend, a local university professor emailed me. She was organizing a panel for students from broken homes and wanted to feature me as a speaker. I stared at the message. "I'm not qualified," I said aloud. Nolan looked up. "You're more qualified than most." The panel took place in an auditorium filled with nervous young adults. Some sat with arms crossed. Some took notes like they were studying grief. I stood behind the podium and adjusted the mic. Most of us weren't raised with the kind of love we needed, but that doesn't mean we're broken. It just means we had to become our own origin story. The room was silent. Some nodded. One girl in the front wiped her cheek. Afterward, a boy in a hoodie came up to me. "My dad says I'm weak because I feel things," he said. I held his gaze. "You're strong because you still do." I didn't become a celebrity. I didn't write a memoir. I didn't start a nonprofit. But I wrote another blog post. This one was titled, "Leaving Isn't Losing, Part 2. You don't owe your pain a performance. You don't have to be noble in your healing. You can be messy and tired and still worthy of a future that doesn't make you flinch." At the bottom, I added one line. "If you've ever had to become your own family, I see you." There was a form. Just a plain government form, black ink on white paper. One line for your old name, one line for your new one. And I hesitated. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I had never done something so fully for me. The name change office sat in a government annex 2 towns over. The floor was gray tile. The walls beige. It smelled like printers and forgotten promises. The clerk didn't blink when I handed her the form. "Reason for name change?" I paused, then said without flinching, "Freedom." She typed something slowly. "Processing takes 10 business days." That was fine. I had waited my whole life to belong to myself. I drove home with the windows down. The wind felt like a baptism. Back at the cabin, Nolan was sitting on the porch, sketching something on a notepad. He looked up as I pulled in. "That it?" he asked. I nodded. He stood, walked over, and hugged me. Not a side hug. Not the stiff, reluctant hug of someone trying to make a gesture. This was real. "You're the strongest person I know," he said. "I'm the most tired person you know," I replied. He laughed. "Same thing." That weekend, I got a call from the director of a small arts high school in the next county. He had read one of my blog posts. "We have a creative writing program," he said. "Mostly kids who've been told their voices don't matter. We're looking for someone who can prove that's not true." I almost declined, but something in me, a version of me that had been buried too long, leaned toward yes. So I said, "Tell me when to start." The first day I walked into that classroom, they stared at me like I was either a substitute or a mistake. I smiled. "Okay, let's get something straight," I said. "You don't owe me a story. You don't owe anyone a story. But if you want to tell it, this is the place." A girl in the back raised her hand. "What if no one wants to hear it?" "Then you tell it louder." The class was quiet. Then someone clapped. Just one person. But it was enough. One evening, as I closed up Ashen Light, a woman in a crisp suit came in. She ordered coffee, glanced around the space, then placed a folded letter on the counter. "For you." She walked out before I could ask anything. I opened it. Inside was a letterhead. Barnes Family Trust. I almost ripped it in half. But I read it. Nora had passed. Natural causes. Quiet. Unannounced. The trust was dissolving. As per Grandpa's last directive, her remaining assets were being donated anonymously to women's shelters and legal aid foundations. There was a note attached, unsigned. Maybe healing doesn't look like winning. Maybe it looks like giving it back better. No name, but I knew the handwriting. That night, I baked a lemon pie. It was Nora's favorite. I sat on the porch with a slice, watching the lake flicker in the moonlight, and I let myself remember the good things. The lullabies when I was sick, the way she used to braid my hair tight enough to hurt, but always kissed my forehead after. The time she let me skip school and eat strawberries in bed. She wasn't only the pain, but she didn't know how to stop giving it. So I stopped receiving it. 2 weeks later, the new name arrived. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. There it was. Aisling Rowe. Not Barnes. Not borrowed. Mine. A name with roots, but no chains. I hosted a small gathering at the bakery that weekend. Not a party, just bread, music, and the people who had walked beside me in silence when the world was loud. Jordan came, so did Camille, and my students, and 3 of my regulars, who now called me family without needing to explain it. We didn't toast, we didn't cry. We just ate, laughed, and filled the room with something Nora never quite made space for: joy without guilt. Later that night, I stepped outside, barefoot on the wood planks, and looked up at the stars. Somewhere, far behind me, there was a version of me still trying to please a woman who never understood softness. I smiled at her, and I whispered, "You don't have to anymore." Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is walk away from people you once called home. But what I've learned, through fire, silence, and starting over, is this: you're allowed to rewrite your story. You don't have to carry the name, the pain, or the silence you were given. You get to choose what defines you now. If you've ever felt like you had to become your own family, like you had to build piece from pieces, I hope this story helped you breathe a little easier. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to let go of something just to save yourself? If this video touched your heart, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from, or tell me what part hit home. And hey, if this story moved you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories that go beyond the surface.